All right, everyone, this is Marco Palmero, founder of Ulysses in Dubai. And in this video, I want to talk with you about the opportunities that we got access to when we were working with a client on off-market deal flow, off-market opportunities here in the Middle East. I want to talk to you about this because many times the conventional way of finding deals might not necessarily be the best one, especially in the Middle East where network in relationships are key. And I want to share with you some examples on a no-name basis just to give you a rough idea of some of the assets that we got offered as we were in the process of working with this client and sourcing for them off-market deal flow. Now, as I mentioned in many other videos, off-book deal flow is one of the services we provide at Ulysses, and we created this solution not only because we needed to create a system for ourselves and for our own acquisitions, but also because a lot of other people asked us to support them in entering the market, either through investment or acquisitions. And they wanted access to assets that were not necessarily available to everyone. And therefore, we created a system that enabled us to source, qualify, and present to them off-market deal flow that might not necessarily be on the market, might not necessarily be available to everyone. Now, let's talk about one example to kind of give you a little bit more perspective around this. Many times I got offered transactions that were available for sale and that were not necessarily disclosed by the party himself. And what I mean by that is very simple. There might be organizations that do have management teams and management companies running the operations, but the actual shareholders might be other people. As a consequence of that, if you approach the company directly, you might not necessarily know that the asset is available for sale. But when you talk with the shareholders and the board of directors, you might find out that they're actually looking at an opportunity to divest a particular asset. And of course, this is a game of information. There's nothing new in what I'm saying, and this is a strategy that many people deploy in many parts of the world. But the point I'm getting at is the relationships that we created with many companies here in the Middle East enabled us to access the people who actually are in control of these assets and then can actually make a decision on whether or not the company can be sold and, whether or not they want to sell it. So, long story short, we were in a very casual conversation with some partners of mine here in Dubai. And as we were talking, we mentioned the idea that some of our clients were looking at assets to buy here. And this partner of ours mentioned that there was a group that was substantially considering selling some of the assets, but they were not putting the news out into the open simply because they wanted to keep it very confidential. They didn't want the company to be devalued within a short time frame, and they didn't want to just have a bunch of people come and contact them without having any real interest in buying the company. And so we substantially got this opportunity out of nowhere. But the point is, we were able to connect with the shareholders of this business and present the credentials that we had for their consideration. It ultimately ended up being that company was actually divesting the vast majority of their assets, but nobody was aware of that, and nobody could get access to that particular opportunity. It's only through network and connectivity that we ultimately were able to connect with these people and find out that they were actually very interested in selling these particular assets. Now, many times what I've seen is that these information are not available to everyone simply because, again, shareholders don't want to devalue their assets. These are relatively small markets, so they want to keep everything confidential. But additionally to that, they want to build trust with the other side before they actually decide to step in and sell part of their business. And that is independently of how much commitment they have in the sale process. Trust is still a big thing here in the Middle East, and it is important to build that relationship correctly to then get access to these particular opportunities. In some cases, I've seen companies that list particular assets in their portfolio for sale, which might just be the initial appetizer. But in reality, they're looking to sell a lot more, but they're not disclosing that up front, simply because they first want to build a relationship with a certain party and then open up their books for the bigger assets that they actually want to offload. So those are just some of the cases that I've been through. Of course, I cannot mention names of these particular businesses because they're pretty confidential. And one of the things that we do in our off-book DealFlow service is we find, qualify, and present these opportunities to clients so that they can get privileged access to the opportunity and then take on the opportunity and start to negotiate the deal on their own. We don't generally get involved in the sale process because we leave the client in full control of the transaction and in the in a one-on-one relationship with the seller. And that is something that creates less complexity, and we've seen a lot of people liking this approach because basically we streamline their deal flow process and we give them access to the right opportunities they need to ultimately get business done. And so they can easily access a market like the Middle East by looking at the right opportunities, picking the best possible one, and then focusing on the sale process instead of just going through the painful deal flow sourcing process, which takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of resources. So long story short, most of the opportunities that we find that are off market might not necessarily be available and might not necessarily be known by many. The point is we are able to find those because the level of connectivity and our presence on the market is quite relevant, and as a consequence of that we can leverage that on behalf of our clients so that they can ultimately accomplish the desired outcome. If you're interested in DealFlow services, you're looking at potential acquisitions and investments in UAE or Middle East, make sure you check the link below. We do take on only a few engagements each quarter simply because we offer bespoke solutions to each client. So there might not be slots available immediately, but we can certainly discuss this and then potentially engage later in the future once we have available slot. The point is, what we do with our off-market deal flow service is we source, qualify, and present to companies deals that are not available in the open market. They're not listed on broker sites and so on and so forth. And then we give them privileged access to those so that they can take control of the transaction and negotiate with the other party one-on-one. They don't need to deal with other intermediaries. And the beauty of that is also that they keep their confidentiality until that very moment, because we do the entire sourcing process on their behalf, and only when they decide to look at the asset, then they can disclose their name and start the interaction, which is something that companies value a lot because it preserves their their plans, kind of like protects their plan, and it avoids a lot of competitors knowing what their interest might be in a certain geography. So again, if you're interested in off-market deal flow services, make sure you check the link below and you book a call with us. Be happy to look at your case, see how we can add value to your project. And I'll see you in the next video.